We've got breaking news out of the NFL where Packers quarterback Jordan Love is expected to return to the lineup on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. That is per multiple reports, including our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. Now, Love has missed the past 2 games with a sprained MCL, with Malik Willis going 2-0 in his absence. You can catch Sunday's game between the Packers and the Vikings at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS and streaming live on Paramount+. Welcome inside HQ Studios. Jeremy St. Louis alongside Danny Cannell. Danny, your reaction here, obviously a big boost for the Packers to get Jordan Love back.
Oh, this is huge, especially initially when the reports came out. You thought, man, this could be 4 to 6 weeks. What could it do to the Packers season? Jeremy, I remember you and I talked about it. We're like, you just got to go 500 when you lose your starting quarterback. To go 2-0 and to get him back sooner than expected, this is huge news for the Packers. And I think this will infuse some life in the organization, which has got to be feeling really good about where they stand right now in the NFL. Everybody has picked up their game, and they got some really solid play out of Malik Willis. So this is great news for Packers fans. I think this is great. It's great for the NFL because I do think Jordan Love is one of the young faces of the league that's going to be playing here for a long time. Just signed the contract. I think this is awesome.
Given what we saw from Malik Willis and the fact that he did go 2-0 and the offense looked decent with him in it, obviously.
Are you stirring up quarterback controversy?
A reliance on the run. Josh Jacobs obviously a big part of things, but what I'm trying to say is, do you think Malik Willis still plays a part in this, maybe as a kind of a spell quarterback at times?
I doubt it. I don't know if Matt LaFleur is going to want to do that, but it probably is an option. Maybe they sprinkle it in there. We've seen other quarterbacks before that are as mobile and athletic as Malik Willis is, and wildcat packages, short yardage situation, and then that debate always crops up. Well, do you want to take Jordan Love off the field? That'll be a decision they'll probably have to make, but I think the best part about this is now you have some depth at the position. Malik Willis looked like his career potentially was going off the rails when he started in Tennessee, was given the option with the Titans, and I think this is a prime example of where so many quarterbacks, we want to judge their success or failure by how they play on the field, when a lot of times it is about the surroundings, about the supporting cast, the coaching you receive and the development you receive, and it is a tribute to Matt LaFleur, who's done a phenomenal job with all the quarterbacks that he's coached, and getting the most out of Malik Willis, I think, is really a testament to him, and it's great to see a young quarterback who a lot of people had written off get an opportunity and make the most of it.
Minnesota Vikings come in as one of 5 undefeated teams in the NFL, sitting at 3-0. Packers there at 2-1. So when you look at Minnesota in this matchup, does this alter things, the way they set themselves up defensively, taking on Jordan Love versus taking on Malik Willis?
Yes, I mean, I think clearly because of what you mentioned, Malik Willis, and the way they were running the ball with Josh Jacobs, I think they'll be more prepared for a more balanced attack and be ready for that passing game to really sort of develop and evolve. So that's what I think Minnesota will do. But I don't think anything will change for them offensively. And speaking of quarterbacks that we're looking at, Sam Darnold's taking advantage of the opportunity there with the Vikings.
Yeah.
This is a traditional NFC North rivalry game that I don't think a lot of people thought we would have these 2 teams where they are, especially the Vikings sitting there at undefeated. No one saw that coming. It's going to be a fun matchup.
Yep. Following the breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ, Jordan Love is expected.
Dolphins are starting quarterback Tyler Snoop Huntley on Monday night against the Titans. Skylar Thompson, who started last week's loss to the Seahawks, is currently dealing with a rib injury. The Fins signed Huntley to their practice squad 2 weeks ago and have since elevated him to the 53-man roster, with Tua Tagovailoa sidelined with a concussion. Over to Detroit, where the Lions head coach Dan Campbell says he expects Sam Laporta to play on Monday against the Seahawks. The All-Pro tight end suffered a sprained ankle during last week's win against the Cardinals, but should be good to go. Laporta ranks 3rd on the Lions this season in both catches and receiving yards. And the Raiders will be without Davante Adams and Max Crosby for Sunday's game against the Browns. Adams is dealing with a hamstring injury while Crosby hurt his ankle. This will be the first game that Crosby misses in his 6-year career with the Raiders. Here's a look at some other notable injury reports heading into the weekend. A number of players already ruled out, including Cooper Kupp, Tank Dell, Trey McBride, and Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown, meanwhile, is questionable, as is Jordan Love, Joe Mixon, and Deebo Samuel. And down in New Orleans, the Saints could be without Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave, who are listed as questionable. In the NFL, the Miami Dolphins are starting quarterback Tyler Snoop Huntley on Monday night against the Titans. Skylar Thompson, who started last week's loss to the Seahawks, is currently dealing with a rib injury. The Fins signed Huntley to their practice squad 2 weeks ago and have since elevated him to the 53-man roster, with Tua Tagovailoa sidelined with a concussion. Over to Detroit, where the Lions head coach Dan Campbell says he expects Sam Laporta to play on Monday against the Seahawks. The All-Pro tight end suffered a sprained ankle during last week's win against the Cardinals, but should be good to go. Laporta ranks third on the Lions this season in both catches and receiving yards. And the Raiders will be without Devontae Adams and Max Crosby for Sunday's game against the Browns. Adams is dealing with a hamstring injury while Crosby hurt his ankle. This will be the first game that Crosby misses in his 6-year career with the Raiders. Here's a look at some other notable injury reports heading into the weekend. A number of players already ruled out, including Cooper Kupp, Tank Dell, Trey McBride, and Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown, meanwhile, is questionable, as is Jordan Love, Joe Mixon, and Deebo Samuel. And down in New Orleans, the Saints could be without Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave. We were finishing up our halftime show there, or our pregame show, I should say, and it was just crazy down to the wire. Damian, I hand this off to you. Unreal performance from Kentucky today.
Absolutely. Shout out to Mark Stoops, and this is just a testament to what he's done to this program. It's not always going to be pretty. They're not going to put up a ton of points. They're not going to wow you, but they're going to make teams that are good beat them. They're going to make it dirty. They're going to make it grimy. They're going to fight, scratch, and claw offensively, defensively, special teams to keep themselves in games and to put themselves to win games like this. You know, I think back to the home game that Kentucky won against LSU all those years ago when LSU was potentially ranked #1. And Mark Stoops has, granted, he wasn't there coaching at the time, but this is what he brings to that program. So huge win for Kentucky, huge win for Mark Stoops. Shout out to those guys in the blue.
I totally agree with everything you said. Congrats to Mark Stoops, but this is a devastating loss for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Like, there's both sides of the story.
Sure.
I think this is what happens when you schedule a bunch of nobodies and you run through them and we all fall for it. We're like, well, they scored 76 points against Furman, and they go out there and blow out teams, Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, Wake Forest, one of the worst teams in the ACC, and everybody's like, look how great they look. You don't truly know the makeup of your team until you get tested, until you get punched in the mouth. And today, Ole Miss got punched in the mouth, and they did not respond. They looked shook for most of the second half, thinking, wait a second, this team is still trying against us? We're Ole Miss. We blow out everybody. And they did not respond to the test. So this is, yes, it's about Kentucky, but it's also about Ole Miss coming up short in a year where their fan base thought they were on a straight line for the playoffs and potentially a national championship. This is a devastating loss for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss.
Well, Ole Miss still have everything they want right in front of them with the new format of college football playoff. I know I say this a million times, especially being in the SEC. But going into the halftime show, I said it, this can be the upset of the year if Kentucky finds a way to pull this off. Just the simple fact of going into Ole Miss, all these high expectations, unranked Kentucky, coming off a nail-biter, really a nail-biter versus Georgia, and going in here and getting this win. Kentucky finds a way to be in games they really shouldn't be in, and then the following week, they're, you know, you get blown out by Mizzou or something like that.
South Carolina, they lost 31-6 to South Carolina.
Exactly. So, I mean, this will happen when you let teams like that stick around for too long. Ole Miss was, I mean, Kentucky was allowed to really open up this game and sustain that energy, and really got it all the way down to the wire and ultimately getting a W. So.
Let me ask you this. What went wrong for Ole Miss in this one? Because we kind of talked about how they dropped the ball on this. What went wrong?
They just didn't respond well to being punched in the face. They didn't respond well. You see a 63-yard completion on 4th and long. Plays like that, you just don't respond well enough to regain the momentum. And going into a hostile environment, being a home team, and then you got a team like Kentucky coming in there and they making these big plays, you feel that energy start to seep away because your fan base is like, oh my God, another one. Like, what are you guys are doing? Kentucky, like, we ain't got nothing to lose.
United States. This is one of those ones that might be a little bit unpredictable, Rich, because it's not a torn ACL, it's not a high ankle sprain, it's an Achilles issue, it's not a tear, it's a different type of a pain that he's feeling in that area. It's obviously bothering him enough that Kyle Shanahan said it himself, you know, the worst day he had was when he was trying to ramp up into week 1. The 49ers have to find a way to stay afloat. They've had a lot of injuries. It sounds like they're getting Kittle back this week. Debo's back on the field. Whether or not he plays in this game or it's in their next game, that's certainly a good sign there. But, you know, this is one of the top players in the NFL. That challenges you as a whole, and there's just not necessarily anything definitive, because even if and when Christian McCaffrey gets back onto the field, there's always the possibility this is something that's still nagging him. So he's trying to figure it out.
And then the injured reserving of Tua was supposed to just give him the space and take away the timeline conversation when it comes to him, Tom. And, you know, then he travels with the team on a 6-hour flight, and the quarterback situation in Seattle for Miami was just seemingly a lost cause, you know? And so we're hearing rumblings about maybe knocking on Denver's door for Zach Wilson, or seeing how things play out with Pittsburgh's Wilson. Are the Dolphins quarterback shopping, knocking on doors, or they're already expecting Tua back? What is the timeline of it, even though we're supposed to give the space to that with his injured reserving, Tom?
Well, I would tell you this, Rich. At last check, the Dolphins hadn't called either of those teams. If you're thinking Tua Tagovailoa is not going to play for the rest of the season, you would think you would be looking for those long-term answers. Maybe it's one of those guys who's a backup quarterback. Maybe it's somebody else's starter who potentially could become available if that team is losing games and is out of the hunt and is just looking to get a draft pick for somebody. But for the Dolphins right now, with Tua Tagovailoa, he did make that trip. The doctors cleared him to fly. It's like 6 hours cross country to Seattle. They cleared him to make that trip. And basically, the short version, this is not the medical version, but the short version of what they've told him is, hey, if you're feeling good, do all your normal activities, just not football stuff. And that's what Tua wants. He wants to be engaged. He's been in meetings. He was on the sideline. He was talking to the quarterbacks. That all tracks with what we've been reporting, which is that Tua intends to be back on the field at some point in the future, and quite possibly later on this season. He's been visiting specialists this week. That was kind of the next checkpoint in that. There's specialists in Pittsburgh and Detroit that he visited back in 2022. You would anticipate those are among the specialists that he's visiting this time around as well. In terms of what they're doing this week, they put Skylar Thompson out there. Skylar Thompson had earned the job, the number 2 job back in training camp. He beat out Mike White for it. I know that, I mean, they've kept him around for 3 years. He started a playoff game for him. They see something in Skylar Thompson, but it didn't translate to the field. And then he got beat up and he got hit, and he's been dealing with a very painful rib injury, according to Mike McDaniel, has practiced on a limited basis. It's hard to imagine with that injury, Skylar Thompson is going to be out there this week, which then would leave you with Tim Boyle, who, you know, just quite frankly, is a practice squad guy all the way. We've seen Tim Boyle play in the NFL before. Or it's Snoop Huntley, who made the Pro Bowl a couple of years ago because he relieved Lamar over the last, 5 games of that season and was able to, get things functioning. It's not, this isn't Lamar Jr., okay? You're not getting that from Snoop Huntley, but there's probably all kinds of things that you haven't used in your offense before because you're not going to expose Tua as a runner, because you're not going to do some of those design types of things. If it is Snoop Huntley on Monday night, and if I were just guessing, Rich, I would say that's who the starting quarterback would be. There's going to be some unscouted stuff that the Titans are going to be facing just because you would never do some of the things with Tua that you can do with Snoop. I would also say this, when you're talking about your franchise quarterback, the $53 million a year player in Tua Tagovailoa, you expect that guy to raise the level of everybody around you. When you're onto your backup quarterback or your third string quarterback, you need those other players to raise the level of the quarterback. Tyreek Hill did not play well last week. Jalen Waddle did not play well last week. They got to play better in this game, regardless of who's at quarterback, for the Dolphins to have a chance.
And I assume Mostert not expected also on Monday night at this point in time?
Hasn't been practicing. We'll see. That's kind of a weird one. It's a chest injury for Raheem Mostert. They initially thought he was going to be back for their last game, and then he didn't practice. We'll get the final designation. I haven't seen it yet if Mike McDaniel said exactly what the designation is going to be, but certainly when a guy hasn't practiced in this long since an injury, you would think he's not going to play, which would mean it's Devon Achan's going to have to be leading that backfield.
I'll ask this on the air, even though this is an off-the-air question. When you come on this show, do you want us to take like a 30-second break to check your phone or something like that? Because I feel like I'm holding things back. Well, you're expertly working us through everything, and you're also receiving information. Honestly, we can talk amongst ourselves for a good 30 seconds if you gotta check on something.
If I gotta take a call, I'll take a call. These are texts that might bear on some things I've said in the last 15 minutes on the show. So we'll update those
honestly
here.
Like we could
nothing
have
catastrophic. Or something catastrophic. Like 2 weeks ago when Bryce Young got benched right before I came on, I'll give you the goods on that. This is still fluid here.
Dude, I could reach out to Jay-Z. We can get a musical act.
Yeah, I do like Pelissero halftime.
Seconds. Yeah, the 30-second act.
For this one, Tom.
All right.
I do like that.
We had Kevin O'Connell on yesterday. I asked him if he's expecting to see Jordan Love. He said yes. What do you think?
It certainly seems to be tracking in that direction, Rich. But if you had asked me last Friday, I would have said it seems like it's tracking for Jordan Love to have a chance to play in that game against Tennessee as well. The last two steps are going to be he needs to get medical clearance from the Packers doctors. And Jordan Love has to tell those doctors, tell the coaches, tell everybody, hey, I can do this. I want to be on the field. I think I can move. I can protect myself. I can play well enough. You go all the way back to when that injury occurred, which was 3 weeks ago today. It was a 3 to 6 week injury. That's the timetable they gave him for an MCL sprain. There was always optimism that he would be on the shorter end of that timetable, but this is the first game that really falls within the timetable. So right now, you would say based upon his level of participation, does not seem like he's had any setbacks. It's an MCL sprain, so you can play with a brace. MCL is going to heal while you play with that brace on. You would say this is the best chance yet for Jordan Love to be on the field. But, again, there's some final conversations that have to take place Friday and Saturday morning. Packers will have a good idea within 24 hours whether or not he's going to be on the field. It's a huge game. There's no doubt about it with the unbeaten Vikings coming to Lambeau Field. But, they've also kind of had their season on the line the past couple of weeks. They found a way to win with Malik Willis. Even if the reps are limited, Rich, I would say this with Jordan Love. They're running more or less the same type of game plan. They can expand it more. There's some additional things that they would do with Jordan Love, but it'd be pretty similar, even if he's not able to take all the reps through the week, which they're saying he's limited here. Jordan Love will be ready to roll if, in fact, all those conversations occur and he's out there on Sunday.
Couple questions about Kansas City at Los Angeles. Justin Herbert's going to go, even with a bye coming up next week? What do you think?
He wants to go, and last week, despite all odds, despite about 5 rolls of tape on that ankle, he found his way to be out there. And really, he was pretty effective until the third quarter when he started taking those hits, and then he tweaked the ankle, and then it just, it wasn't something that he was going to be able to keep going on. Again, that's another injury that, if you feel confident that you can get out there and function well enough, there's a chance that you can heal while playing on a high ankle sprain. It's not good to keep injuring it, obviously, but there's nothing here that suggests that, anything's broken, anything has extended the timetable at this point. There's a lot of guys who don't necessarily have that same mentality of, hey, I'm going to put myself out there. I want to go every single week, so good for Justin Herbert. I don't think I know the Chargers wouldn't put him out there if they feel like he's putting himself in harm's way, but you're also talking about a team that's not going to have its